Hello guys, before we proceed with our today's presentation, it's important that we respond from the question that was asked by Johanna. Johanna, she's from Switzerland. Yeah, yes, she's from Switzerland, and good enough. When I was looking on the list of the person that I've registered for today's presentation, I can find the Johan's name is there. So she is following. Johanna, she wanted to know some important steps that as a researcher should consider while preparing in the process of data correction. That was the question that Johan wanted for us. And I remember she went further trying to ask some question as to, is it important or is it accepted when a researcher uses more than one analytical tools within the same research? That was the other question that was provided by our lovely sisters from Switzerland. And we promised that before we go to the next series of our presentation, Vera will spend almost 15 to 20 minutes trying to highlight the overviews on this idea. And it's true that we as the researchers, we correct data, we go to the field, we correct data, whether by the use of questionnaire, the use of interview, the use of experimental-based field work, and sometimes we collect from the lab-based experiments, and any more ways of data collection as we had already discussed. And I am sure that topic is clear. I remember the hot discussion that was there. We provided some with relevance principles behind as to why do we use these methods in the data correction rather than this way. Which criteria is so important to be undertaken while on the choice of a particular method, which was the approach and the philosophical behind, the paradigms behind, the nature of the stats, the objectives, and all those parameters that we discussed. So today, I'm going to highlight you Johannes and the other friends of ours in this particular area as what are the important steps. As when we are having data with us in hands, then is where the problems begin. We start asking ourselves questions as what am I going to do with this data? Okay, I'm having a lot of questionnaire with me and they are also filled with some information. So how am I going to manipulate this data so that at the end of the day, they come up with the relevant information that is targeted to answer to a particular hypothesis that I formulated, or the question that I formulated, or the objective of the study. I have witnessed some of my students in the former areas where I used to work. They come up with data, but they know nothing on what to do with those data. They normally know that there is a concept of data analysis, but how to analyze this data? Which conditions should be taken in the process of analysis? And how do I make selectivity of the analytical tools and all other related perspectives? So regarding to Johannes, I'm going to highlight you some important points of which is very useful for us as junior researchers, because the concept of data analysis is not as the way it is. It comprises of some important steps, insights, of which as a researcher you need to follow one after another in a systematic and typical analytical perspectives. And from here, I discourage the use of this data, that you have data with you, and you take this data to some specialist statisticians from which you ask them to make analysis for you, and then they come up with what they have come up with. So remember that statisticians, he was not the one in the field. He or she can simply analyze your data depending on the way you have arranged your data. And he will apply the principles of garbage in, garbage out. That's all. And at the end of the day, it takes a lot of money for you. But if you learn on yourselves on how to analyze this data, and then you require some technical part on the statisticians by giving the parameters that I need 1, 2, 3 to be analyzed because of this and this and this, and then after which you will be in a relevant situation. Now, these are some of the important steps. I said that first you need to have the data with you. You will have data with you in your hands. You have already corrected the data from the field. And then the data have contained a lot of information. And the data on its own, they cannot display anything, but they possess a lot of information that you need to interpret them, and they will come up with relevant information for the readers in the near future on your work. At first, you need to choose the analytical tools that you find could be relevant for your study. And the choice of these analytical tools will depend on the objective of the study, the nature of the study, the question that you have asked yourselves. What are the intended questions to be answered? What was the hypothesis that was formulated from your study? How complex you need to make within the variables of the study. Such are some of the criteria that will decide on the choices of the analytical tools. And the use of analytical tools as one of the questions that was asked by our lovely sister is whether do we use only one analytical tools or we can go to more than one. The answer will depend on the nature of the study. Sometimes, some stages, you can use even more than 2 analytical tools based on what was the intentions of the use of these analytical tools to answer to a particular targeted goals within your study and within your parameters. Because some analytical tools might be found within a particular software rather than on the other software. We can use software and other parameters, as we will be discussing, as one point after another to the next steps, but they were just simply highlighting. Then after, you will need to do what we call the data familiarization. And at this point, you have your data in hand, as I said. You have decided for the tools for the data analysis. Then you need to familiarize with your data. Under this section, you need to make a clear classifications of your data set within your variables. That this particular data set, they will be responsible for question number 1 or hypothesis number 1. And these categories of data, they will be responsible to answer on question number 2 or hypothesis number 2 or the objective number 2. You make some familiarization. So you make such a clear understanding of your data, proper understanding of your data. And each data should be identified is there for what purpose. It's made there to answer which particular questions. And then suppose, let me take you as if we have several of these softwares, analytical softwares. I prefer the use of the R software, which is full of commands, but with a good visual impressions, and it's so statistical in nature, and it has some computer-related commands that you need to learn on it. Good enough, you can be learning on the same time learning from the expertise of how to execute some command and whatever. That's the goodness of that particular software. But we have the easier friendly users kind of software that is easier to use for each and every of you. This we call the SPSS. This is the common the commonest kind of software of which most of you guys, you know it, and you had used it somewhere, one where in times. Most of the researchers will start from this user-friendly kind of software for data analysis. Suppose now we are using the SPSS as a tools for data analysis. Within the SPSS, we have this the variable section and the data section. And then on the variable section, you need to formulate a so-called the template formulation, the templates. These templates are the variable setups. Let me use the term variable setups. It's within this template. Suppose you are having this questionnaire. Your questionnaire might have maybe 10, 12, or 15 questions, depending on your study. And then within the question, you may find the subsection, some sub-questions. Maybe question number 1 with Roman 1, Roman 2, Roman 3. Question number 2, whether we see part A, part B. Question number 3, that way you'll find some. So within the templates is the role of you as a researcher now to formulate these templates and encodes all the questions that were asked from the questionnaire in a forms of a variable style. Maybe the question number 1 was intending to ask about these particular issues. And within this question number 1, there are subsection 1, subsection 2, subsection 3, with their Likert scales or the choices of that were given for the respondent to surprise, whether agree, strong agree, weak agree, neutrals, and whatever. All those things should be well framed in a template, such that during data coding, it will become easy for you to match. So at first, you need to create a template. After the template is created on the variable view, then what follows is the data coding and entry or importing. And the data coding is an important step of which you as a researcher, you need to do. What do we do with data coding? Suppose you will be having a set of the questionnaires that you have collected from your respondents, and you might have maybe 500 number of questionnaire depending on the number of the sample size. Then you have the questionnaire number 1 from, you label them on number 1, 2, 3, depending on whatever you give. Simply you code them, you give name, and then you will be taking questionnaire number 1. That questionnaire number 1, you start with on question number 1. How about this respondent number 1 respondent? Then you just start filling those questions, those answers from the respondent number 1, from question number 1 to the last question. Then you put aside. You take the second questionnaire, you code on the same what he was responded. Because you have already created the template, this will become very simple, just coding, entry, data entry. You do it from the questionnaire number 1 to the last questionnaire, depending on the number of your sample size. Even if you have a large sample size, you can even ask some guys to help you just coding, because coding is simply easy. Or looking on what the respondent has responded, whether yes, if yes, you put 1, you have already given some seminars, yes, 1. This one, you have already created the template, that becomes very easy. Then after, there are some start of which, or some information that you do not require to make coding directly from the template of your SPSS software. You can create this information or template from the Excels or the zip scales, and then you simply import the files into the software and work on it. The other steps is data processing now and organization. You have already encoded your data on the templates. Now it's your role to make organization of data, processing of the data, from which, what will you be doing as a researcher? Under this particular area, as a researcher, you need to make data screening. And show you need to make some data screening, you do some transformation of data from one form to another, because some data you may find that they are not displaying the proper information that you need in a certain form. Then to make it so representative, you need to transform into another form such that it will display the character of your interest. And sometimes we do the so-called merging, okay, where you can add and delete some information. This is typically your work as a researcher. But if you take your data to statisticians simply without making a proper follow-up, the statistician may do whatever it is within your data without understanding that there are some changes. You, as a responsible person for that particular study, performing these prior activities is so useful for your last output. Then you need to choose the what we call the within cases and the cross cases. After you have already processed your data, transformed it into a proper format that you find that is this could be relevant. Now, what next is now you decide, okay, this parameter or this data from this particular variables, this rows number 1 or row number 4 to row number 6, these rows that are responsible to answer on objective number 1. Row number 2 and row number 6 and row number 9, this will be responsible for the objective number 2. Row number 12 and row number, you make some decisions on the rows that are within your data sets and your variable setups that will be responsible to provide the answers to a particular hypothesis or question that you have already asked. And sometimes you need to understand the relationship between the variables. So also you need to make this what we call a crosscut analysis. That, okay, row number 12 and row number 2, they will show the interlinking, the relationship. Therefore, during that analysis, when I will be analyzing for the relationship between my data, I will take row number this one and the row number this one. They will provide me the relationship-based information. So you need to make that choices of your data. Then after you have arranged all those parameters, you go for what we call the data analysis. Data analysis is nothing, rather an execution of commands from the software. That's why I said from the beginning, when you have your data and you take the data the way they are to a statistician without a proper follow-up and some directives, a statistician could simply go direct to the last stages of what we call data analysis and execution of commands, from which there is a concept of garbage in and garbage out, and the result will come up, and then you will interpret your data. Might be interpretation in a wrong way. So that's why I said it's better you do these activities 95% on your own as a researcher, and then you can acquire some technical points of which it's beyond your capability because you are not from either the field of statistician. But once you go detail reading, each and everything is easy, simple, and possible. Then after, you end up with the so-called interpretations of the outcomes. This is also one of the challenges because the outcome from the software may come up in terms of some sort of tables or some sort of numbers of which it cannot display and explain and describe each and everything. It's the role of the researcher now to understand the concept of, okay, this particular number is which kind of information is trying to tell. That is also another task of you as a researcher. So if you find that if you have already properly organized the data following all the stages and you come up with the execution of command, interpretation is now very easy. Even if you cannot understand the proper, you can even have an assistant from somebody, and the interpretation could give us a proper way. But don't get bothered, get worried, don't hesitate. You can ask, you can call for us, and you can enter in our YouTube, where we can also provide some ways on how we interpret the result from the outcome of the software. Now, from this highlighting of the overview, you can get the information of this as we will be looking one part after the other. We look on how on the choice of the analytical tools, how do we do with familiarization, how do we create the templates, how do we do data coding, how do we do data processing, how do we do choice and data analysis. All these steps will be made on an independent class. So to be in the position of following this, please, I request you to visit my YouTube by the name of Research Techniques by Marumbuja. Subscribe as well. Share this knowledge, and you may ask more, particularly for those whom they are not directly engaging in our discussion with us. They can use that particular as an alternative way to acquire some information regarding the concept and ideas in research. With this particular idea, I could say thank you for your time. And now we are going to tune back into our today's discussion. And I will spend almost 40 minutes for the next session, because we have already spent almost 20 minutes for this particular presentation. Hope you will be helped. Johan, my sister, you had already got some importance. That is okay. I am listening. All right, thank you. Okay, and now fine, let us tune up ourselves and change our minds in our today's presentation.